So we are on story 108, the Syrophoenician Canaanite woman. And this is as I had stated, this is a situation where we have a person that is coming to the Lord with a need. Now, I think everybody to a certain degree can relate to this because no matter what your circumstances, we all recognize that we need the Lord. There is nothing on this earth that can totally satisfy every desire, every hope, every dream. So therefore, we always find ourselves in situations where we have a want, a request, a need, a desire. The Lord is the one that provides the hope and the feeling of possibilities that the Lord gives us. And that's an important part of life, that you will be able to go through life with the understanding that you have yet better things to come. And that's the promise that the Lord gives us. We may not always see it in what we consider to be this natural realm, but our spiritual realm, our spiritual life, our eternal life has been guaranteed. And Scripture tells us that eyes have not seen nor has ears heard the things that God has prepared for them that love Him. So we thank God for this story. I think we'll be able to pull a lot of wonderful personal truths out of this that we'll be able to use in our everyday walk with the Lord. So let's take a listen to story 108, the Syrophoenician Canaanite woman.
Story 108, the Syrophoenician Canaanite woman. And Jesus rose and went away from there, and withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And when he had entered a house, he wanted no one to know, and he was not able to be hidden. But after hearing of him, behold, a Canaanite woman, whose little daughter had an unclean spirit, came out of that region, falling at his feet. But the woman was a Greek of the Syrophoenician race. She cried to him, saying, "Be merciful to me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is miserably demonized." And she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came to him and asked him, saying, "Dismiss her, because she is crying after us." And he answered and said, "I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But coming, she was bowing to him, saying, "Lord, help me." But he answered and said to her, "Let the children be satisfied first, for it is not good to be taking the children's bread and throwing it to the dogs." But she answered and said to him, "Yes, Lord, for even the dogs feed on the children's scraps falling from under the table of their lords." And Jesus answered and said to her, "O woman, your faith is great. Because of this saying, go away. Let it be done to you as you wish. The demon has come out of your daughter." And her daughter was healed from that hour. And coming back into her home, she found the little girl lying on the couch, and the demon was cast out.
All right. So we see this story here, and I think number one, we can relate to this from a standpoint that when you are a parent and you have a child, there is really no greater ministry, I think there is, than for a parent to care for a child. I think that's the greatest ministry, the family. When a father and a mother recognizes that God has given them this individual who cannot care for themselves, cannot protect themselves, cannot guide themselves, and allows that father and that mother to act and react in the ways to develop that little one. And what you'll find is that you will learn certain things from being a parent. You learn sacrifice. You learn patience. You learn how to put another individual first. You learn how to have a concept of thinking that's not centered around your own well-being, but the well-being of another individual, being your children. And that is so much like how God is. God's philosophy of how he can bring goodness to us. Jesus, when he was on earth, didn't think about his own physical health and safety and well-being above that of which was why he was here, was to bring that health and safety and well-being eternally to us. So I always say that the greatest ministry there is the ministry of the family, of bringing children and helping and teaching. And some people are gifted where it doesn't just stop with your own family. You help other families, you help other children, you help, and that spreads abroad. And the more that can happen, where sometimes you may not be the parent, but maybe you're the brother, or maybe you're the aunt or the niece, or whatever the circumstance is. You just have that that overflowing of that gift and of that ministry, and it's a God-given ministry because God created the family, and it is a structure of how our nature is, as far as how we're developed. We're not developed. Like sometimes you look in the wild and you see certain animals that are born, and as soon as they're born, they're swimming and going off, or they're jumping up and running, and they're able to a certain degree, kind of get along. They don't have to be carried all along. Some animals do, but there's quite a few of them that don't have that. Well, human beings are not like that. We are born helpless, and we need that structure, and it's built in. And when you learn from that and see that, I think it helps to shape the care and the personality of the individual that ministers to the child. Now, with that being said, there are so many people that don't have that. And that's the sad part. There are so many parents that just, you can't even call them parents, the people that bring children into the world, but don't care about them. They don't love them. They could care less what happens to them. They don't produce no sacrifice. They don't have no dedication. And so a story like this with the Syrophoenician woman, you can see that she has a need, and her child, her daughter, has a problem, and she is looking for an answer. And she has found out and heard about this individual, Jesus. But what's interesting is that she doesn't just come to Jesus and see him as a way to get her answered prayer. She sees him a little better, a little deeper, a more realistic. She sees more truth about who she is, which is important about the story, because you look at this individual as someone that you may not have suspected to have that clarity about who Jesus was while he was walking on earth, but she did. So let's take a look. So story 108, the Syrophoenician woman. And this story is also parallel in our parallel gospel. We see this in Mark 15, 21 through 28. Actually, I should say Matthew 15, 21 through 28. And in Mark 7, 24 through 30. And so we see this story opens up in our merged gospel. And it says, and Jesus rose and went away from there. All right. And if you remember from story 107, how we were seeing that Jesus was talking and telling the Pharisees and the Sadducees in Capernaum about the real aspect of what defilement is. So when it says, and Jesus moved and went away from there, that's where he was coming. And he withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. It's down in another little town area. And when he had entered the house, he wanted no one to know. So now, here is Jesus in a situation where he's actually looking for some privacy. Just a little piece of quiet. And one of the things we have to always try to keep in mind, Jesus, when he came to the earth, he came as God. But he also was man, which means he had the same types of feelings and body conditions that we have. One of the passages of Scripture says that he was acquainted with our grief. He knew our sorrows. He understood the pains and the heartaches and the difficulties that we had. And so it's important to keep in mind that though we often look at him as who he is, we don't want to neglect the aspect of his human needs as well. So he needed some privacy. He needed some rest. But it says that he wanted no one to know, and he was not able to hide himself. So it was not something that he was able to accomplish because the people knew. Word spread quick. They didn't have Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram back then, but the word got around through what? Word of mouth. And when people start talking, there's nothing moves information quicker than people talking. And they found out quick that Jesus was in this area, in the area of Tyre and Sidon, and before you know it, the word got out. Now, so he's there to get some rest, probably why he went there, and yet while he's there, the word gets out, and it says, "But after hearing of him, behold, a Canaanite woman, whose little daughter who had an unclean spirit." Okay, so we have this woman that is not from the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Canaanites, actually, she's from the lineage that came through Ham, and we'll see a lot more of that when we get into our study in Genesis. But she's not of the Israeli descendant. But she is someone that has heard about Jesus, though she's not a Jew. She's not a Hebrew. All right? And she had a daughter. And that is commonplace no matter what you have, no matter what you are. You could be Jew, Gentile, bond free. When you have children, as we had already stated, that's something that everybody can relate to. And so she had a need because of her little daughter. And the daughter had an unclean spirit. So that means she had something going on in her spirit. This was not a physical situation. This was a spiritual situation. One of the things I think that we often overlook in our so-called modern day is that we overlook the fact that a lot of things, though they may manifest themselves from the physical, they have a root cause in the spiritual realm. How your spirit is injured and damaged or hurt. And those things can actually be brought through time, and sometimes we can ignore them, and sometimes they're not easily seen. In this particular case, it was obvious. This woman knew what was going on. She knew that her daughter had an unclean spirit. How this unclean spirit got into the little daughter, I can't answer that. I don't know. I just know that back in those days, it was a lot more prevalent as far as being aware of exactly what it was than what we see today. And I think the one thing that we do keep in mind is that God does know all things. And today we have a lot of different things that people have, but we're not sure, oftentimes we debate as to whether this person has a spiritual issue or a physical issue. And and our science tries to put everything on the natural. When I think when we go through prayer, we can find that some of this stuff is emotional, some of it could be mental, and some of it certainly could be spiritual. All right. So this woman has this unclean spirit coming from the region falling to her feet. So she came from out of that region of Tyre and Sidon. She came to Jesus because her daughter had an unclean spirit, and she fell at Jesus' feet. But the woman was a Syrophoenician. The woman was a Greek of the Syrophoenician race. All right. So she is labeled as just being someone that was not part of whom Jesus came to initially. Jesus came first to the children of Israel, to the Hebrew people. And he was to teach them, and then they were supposed to be the ones that would bring the teachings of Jesus to the whole world. All right, and we'll talk more about that a little later as we see them deny Jesus. But it says, and crying to him, saying, "Be merciful to me, Lord." All right, now this is where we get to see some insight on this woman. Number one, she calls him Lord. Okay, and we'll leave it like that. That could mean a whole lot of different things. She could be just calling him Lord because she sees that that's what other people call him, or that he is superior. One of the things that people would do, even with when it came to like grandchildren, and the grandchildren would call the grandfather Lord or you know, with those titles. So you could leave it like that. But then as you go on and you read the rest of it, and she says, "Be merciful to me, Lord, Son of David." So she recognized him as a promise to a Hebrew scripture. Now remember, she's a Canaanite, Syrophoenician. All right, she's what would be considered a Greek. Not she is a Gentile. She's not a Hebrew, but she's calling him Son of David, which is a Hebrew title. This is something that the Hebrew scriptures talked about. So she had some familiarity with the teachings of the prophets, the teachings of Moses. She had some Hebrew scripture teaching. So she was aware of some of these things, and by calling him the Son of David, recognized that he was that promised prophet, that promised Messiah. So she sees him in a great light, better than a lot of the people to whom he came to will see him. And you see here that as this plays out, she says, "My daughter is miserably demonized." So she says, "My daughter is vexed with the devil. My daughter has this demon. My daughter is possessed." All right? And she kept asking him to cast out the demon out of her daughter. So she was coming to him pleading. And Jesus did not react right away because he understood the order in which he had to come. He had to come first and give the information to the Hebrew people, to the Jews. And then it would go to Samaria and then to the uttermost part of the world. That's what he's going to tell them later on. So he understood the methodology of which the information as to who he was and what he was going to be doing, and where all of his signs and miracles were to be done at. This is why he was born into a Hebrew family. He was raised in Hebrew towns. All right? Because that was the instruction. Because this was the promise that was given to David. This was the promise that was told to Abraham, that his descendants would be great, and they would be a blessing to the whole world. Well, here is that great descendant, Jesus, that is a blessing to the whole world. And then his teachings and his words that are to be carried out, which were to be carried out by the Jews, but in our day today we found out that no, they're not. They're carried out by Gentiles, just like this woman. All right? So we see here, it said, "But he did not answer her. And his disciples came to him." So his disciples are seeing this, they're watching this. "And asked him, saying, Dismiss her, because she is crying after us." Now, the disciples bring forth an awareness that sometimes we forget, that these individuals were not always, often how we like to see them. They weren't always the super compassionate. They weren't always the super caring. They had their issues. They had their concerns about what they are going to receive and how they're going to benefit. As we continue to go through this merged gospel, we're going to continuously see that the disciples were very concerned about themselves, about how they were going to pan out in this new ministry that Jesus was bringing forth. And Jesus, is he coming to bring forth the overthrow of the Roman government? And what position will I have when that happens? And they're going to debate amongst themselves about these types of things, wondering who is going to be the greatest in the kingdom. So their interests, though they have been chosen by God, and though they are God's chosen apostles, they are not perfect. They got issues. And the Lord has to bring them to a greater spiritual awareness, to the point to where they can see things similar to how this woman, who is not a Hebrew, sees things. So oftentimes we look at people, and sometimes you look at a person and say, well, this person don't know too much or don't understand too much. So sometimes you gotta slow down, pump the brakes a little bit. You'd be surprised what people have insight on. especially when people go through stuff, when they deal with difficulty. And this woman's difficulty that she's dealing with her daughter, I'm sure has brought to her some clarity on how she should focus on what God can do to help her circumstances. And you got to keep in mind that back then, these people, they did believe in God. They believed in who Jesus was. I should say who God was. And they were learning about who Jesus was. But they had other beliefs as well. They believed in many different gods. People back then in the time of Jesus were not as atheistic in their concepts as we are a lot of times today. So they did have a God consciousness. But to have it right and to have it correct, it's like, when somebody's playing a sport, you can say, well, I know how to play basketball. I understand how it is. And when you get the ball, you just try to run and jump, but you don't recognize that you have a team. Well, yeah, you do know how to play. You know how to dribble. You know how to shoot. You know how to move. But you don't understand the concept of what it takes to actually to win. And so this is how a lot of these Hebrew people were, even though they were chosen people, they still had to be taught how to win. Now, when the coach teaches you how to win, it's up to you to decide whether you want to do what? Accept it or reject it. And try to do things your own way. All right? And so this woman here, she gets it. She understands that Jesus is part of a bigger picture. And she sees him as the Son of God. But these disciples are just saying, no, she's bothering you. You came here to get rest. Why don't you just cast her away? Send her away. No real concern for the woman. No real concern for the woman's daughter. All right. But now look at Jesus, and we have to look at this carefully, because oftentimes people say that, well, Jesus dismissed her too, but Jesus did not dismiss her. All right. So it says, and he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So Jesus didn't tell the woman to go away. He didn't tell the woman, I'm not going to help you. He just said, I've been sent to help and to bring this information to the children of Israel, to the Hebrew people. And then it will go, and they're going to be given the responsibility to bring it abroad. That's why I'm here, to deliver this message to them and to allow them to receive the truth. And then I'm going to, he's going to die for the sins of the world, and the Hebrew people are going to display that message to let everybody know. So that's what he's saying. I came to the lost to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Okay, so then what does this woman do? Now, keep in mind, in that statement, he didn't tell her to leave. He just told her his purpose of who he's here actually to focus on right now. It says, in coming, she bowing to him. So now she comes closer and she's bowing. She's worshiping him. And she's coming in humility. All right, saying, Lord, help me. So she's recognizing that you can help me. I know you can help me. Now she's already called him the Son of David. She's now bowing to him. She's worshiping him. And she continues to call him Lord. But he answered and said to her, let the children be satisfied first. All right. So, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now, Jesus is giving her an illustration. He's saying that even in a household, when you have children and you have pets, when you are preparing a meal, there is a particular order in which you give the meal. The meal is given to the family, and then if you have a pet who you do care for, but you give the children the food first, and the scraps that the children don't have, you then do what? You give to the pets. So Jesus understood that that's how it is, and so there was an order. And he's not, people say, well, he's calling this woman a dog. He's not calling the woman a dog. What he's saying is that to her is that there is an order to certain things. I first have to give this to the children of Israel, and then it will go to Samaria, and then it will go to. So the illustration is not an illustration to compare the children of Israel as the little children of the family and everybody else as the dogs. What the illustration is to show is that there is an order in things, and he is following an order of things, and that is the purpose. But she takes this same order and she brings out a very important part. So he says that you don't take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. And then she says, but she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, but even the dogs feed from the children's scraps falling under the table of their Lord. So what she says is yes. But even sometimes while the children are eating, sometimes stuff falls. And all I'm looking for is just to allow for something that they may allow to fall. And don't have to wait till they finish. I can actually get something now. And so she brings that illustration back to him. And look at what Jesus' response is. So reading this again, she goes, yes, Lord, even the dogs feed on the children's scraps falling from under the table of their Lord. And Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, your faith is what? Great. So he looks at this individual, he sees this woman, she gets it. She knows that Jesus is here not just for the children of Israel. He's here for the whole world. But she also understands that he's here to bring it in a particular way. And she's not trying to change it. She's not trying to say it's wrong. Well, how come you coming to them? That's the way that God decided to go. He told Abraham, I'm going to come through your lineage. I'm going to come through your family. And that's how it actually happened. And here he is. Here's the Messiah. He came through the families of Abraham. And now he's here on earth. And he has to minister to that lineage in which he came from. But this woman is saying, yes, but even while you're doing it, there's some scraps that will just fall. The people won't pick up and won't eat, won't digest. Some of that can fall. Let that fall on me. Let me benefit from that. And Jesus says, you know what? You are correct. Your faith is great. You understand. You have a concept that brings forth a true understanding as to what's going on. And he says, "O woman, your faith is great. Because of this saying, go away." So he's saying now, because of this saying, you can go on your way. What you wanted, you got. All right? And he says, "Let it be done to you as you wish. The demon has come out of your daughter." And her daughter was healed from that hour. And coming back into her house, she found the little girl, her daughter, lying on the couch, and the demon was cast out. So what we see here, once again, I think this is a beautiful story of how God can do all things. Y'all loud over there.
I'm sorry.
How God can do all things. And oftentimes when you're thinking of how you can get things done, tradition, and this is what we were talking about in story 107, how tradition and circumstances and situations will tell you that it just can't happen for you. So now we see in story 108 how a woman is showing you how when you are seeking the Lord itself is always going to go according to how things are written. He's going to fulfill every prophecy, every illustration, every metaphor, every type of him. However, the Lord is above all things, and there is nothing too hard for God. Nothing. And so oftentimes we think that we can box God in and say, well, God, you can't do this and you can't do that. He cannot be boxed in. All right? And we're going to continue to see this. And so here's a situation where, well, you would think that because he's not supposed to be catering to the Gentiles yet, that she had no hope. She did have hope because she brings forth the fact that there are a lot of truth and great information and great things that people can receive that you are giving out that they're not eating. They're not receiving everything. And so the stuff that they're not eating that's falling to the ground, let me at least benefit from it. So when he's teaching about who he is, about him being the Messiah, and how and there are certain people that are there, they hear him as a healer, but they may not see him as the son of David, as the promised Messiah. They're not seeing him in all these different ways. These people to whom he came to. So he's saying, well then, she said, well then, let that what you give to them, let it hit the ground and be useful to me. Which is a beautiful illustration that she brings forth. And that's why the Lord said, great is your faith. All right. I think we're going to be able to squeeze in one more here. Just trying to look at story 109. Jesus heals a deaf mute and many others. Let's take a listen here.
Story 109. Jesus heals a deaf mute and many others. And again, coming out from the region of Tyre, Jesus came through Sidon beside the Sea of Galilee within the region of Decapolis. And going up into the mountain, he sat there. And they brought to him a deaf mute who spoke with difficulty. And they entreated him that he would place his hand on him. And taking him from the crowd by himself, he put his fingers into his ears. And after spitting, he touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he groaned and said to him, Ephphatah, that is, be opened. And immediately his ears were opened, and the restraint of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke correctly. And he cautioned them that they should tell no one. Yet as much as he cautioned them, so much more they proclaimed it exceedingly. And they were utterly astonished, saying, He has done all things well. He makes even the deaf to hear, and the dumb to speak. And there came to him great crowds, having with them lame, blind, maimed, dumb, and many different ones. And they cast them beside the feet of Jesus, and he healed them, so that the crowds wondered, seeing the dumb speaking, maimed whole, lame walking, and blind seeing. And they glorified the God of Israel.
All right. So we see some more of this as he continues his journey through Tyre and then into Sidon, and he's coming down into Sidon. And we see Jesus once again is showing forth the signs of the Messiah. Right? And these are the signs that go forth before him. And once again, we talked about signs and how signs can give you direction. When you follow a sign, when you're driving and you're in a place that you haven't been before, you're looking for that particular sign. You're looking for it. Somebody says, well, when you get to so and so place, you want to look for a sign that says, North Decapolis or exit 22 or whatever it can be. So as you're driving, you're looking for that sign, and that sign shows you that you're in the right direction and where to make the next move. And so Jesus is coming and he's showing signs so that you can be able to see where to go. He is the one to follow, because we all are looking for that aspect of who is our God, who is our creator, who is our one that brings the truth of why we are here to us. And Jesus says, I am the one that can do that. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the light. So as we see this, as he continues to do these miracles and he's showing these signs, it says, and again coming out from the region of Tyre, Jesus came through Sidon. All right, so as we saw before, he was going through Tyre and Sidon, so now he's in Sidon. Besides the Sea of Galilee, within the regions of Decapolis. And going up into the mountain, he sat there. Now once again, he's probably looking for somewhat peace and quiet. Just trying to get, it says, and they brought to him a deaf mute who spoke with difficulty. Right? So they bring to him a person that was deaf and was mute in the aspect that he couldn't speak with clarity. He could speak with grunts and sounds. So it wasn't that he couldn't make sounds, but because he was deaf, he couldn't hear how to make the sounds. Right? And it says, so he spoke with difficulty. And so as we see this, as we go through this, we definitely want to point out a couple things here. And it says, and they entreated him that he would place his hand on him. So they wanted him to do an act of touching. They were telling Jesus how we want you to do it, and that's something that I think that it's important that the story points out, because oftentimes we kind of want Jesus to do things, and we want him to do it a certain way. And not to say that that's wrong, and not to say that because Jesus could have just spoke, and the person could have been healed. Jesus could have just, told them, go on your way, and the person would have been fine. But the people have gotten accustomed to seeing Jesus make contact and touch. But there has been certain situations where he just said, go your way, like he did with this Syrophoenician woman in story 108. All right, so, but they had a concept of what they wanted to see, and they wanted to see him to be touched. Nothing really wrong with that, but don't be confined to that. Be open to how the Lord wants to do things. And it says, and they brought him, it says, and talking, and taking him rather, from the crowd by himself. Actually, let me go back. I skipped a piece here. And it says, and they brought him a deaf mute who spoke with difficulty, and they entered, and they entreated him that he should put his hands on him, and taking him from the crowd by himself. So he took the individual, he took the deaf man from that crowd, and he brings him to himself kind of alone. He put his finger in his ear. So Jesus takes his finger and he puts it in his ear. And after spitting, it says Jesus spit. And where did he spit? I don't know if he spit in the man's ear, if he spit on the ground, or spit on his finger. But he did spit. And he says, and touching his tongue. All right, so did he spit and then have the spit touch his tongue? I don't know, but he touched his tongue. So now I look at all of this, and I find it interesting that because they were looking for Jesus to do certain things, and so Jesus actually does quite a few things. He said, I could have just spoken. I could have put my finger in his ear, which is what he did. He spit.
No, like he went like this, put a spit on his fingers
And then touched his tongue. Exactly. He put some spit on his finger and touched the man's tongue. And then so he went through all of this action. Now, the benefit of him doing all this, I think, is important for us to kind of take a moment and just stop and try to make sure we understand. One of the things I think is important why Jesus didn't do his healings all the same was because then we would have taken that and produced that into a formula. We would have said, well, this is how you do it. And people do that even today. People say, well, you know what? When you need something, you gotta touch a person, and that's how and then you pray for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not the only thing. And it's not the touching that does it. It's not to be able to. We have to recognize that whatever we do by faith with the understanding that the Lord does the healing regardless of the method. So we see him here doing a different method. All right? And we're going to continuously see different methods. And I think he does these methods in a different and variety of ways to keep us from getting hung up on the method. So that we don't always say, well, this is how things are done. You got to go in there, you got to touch him, you got to do this, and you got to spit on your fingers and smack it on his neck. So we don't have to worry about trying to be correct in how we do things from a physical method. The one thing that we want to make sure that we're able to do is that we are able to recognize that our faith is in who? In Jesus. That's how we're believing that Jesus is going to make this work well. All right, so let's keep going here. So, and it says, and looking up to heaven, he groaned. So then so now Jesus goes through his own posture. He looks up to heaven, and then he groans and says, Ephphatha, which is to say, be open. So then he speaks these words. So Jesus went through a lot of different things when he could have just said, go. He's healed. But once again, I think it's important to see that he doesn't want you to get caught up in the procedures. So we don't want people walking around talking about, well, I'm gonna do what Jesus did. I'm gonna spit on my finger and touch your tongue. No, you don't have to do all that. If God don't really have you what clear instructions, and that's what He wants you to do, then I don't think that's a wise thing to be doing, going around spitting on folks. It says, and immediately his ears were open. Okay, How quick was it? Immediately. So his ears were open. But here's the interesting. And the restraint of his tongue was loose. So his tongue was bound by his inability to hear how words sound. That's why his tongue was because his tongue, he didn't know how to make the sound because he couldn't hear it. But it says, and he spoke clearly. So not only was his hearing healed, but instantly his speech was clear. But that means that somehow or another he had to have a recollection of how words sound when he never had that before. So the healing was amazing in the sense that it was all of his brain synapses and his memory of how words sound, all that was given to him. How to pronounce words that he never heard clearly. He now knows how to do it. Well, where did he get the memory to know? He never really heard the word said clearly, but that's the miracle of God. You see? That's the beauty of what God can do. And that's when you look at this miracle, it's one that is more than just unclogging the ears, but it's also unclogging the mind and the giving to the mind of what it was deprived of. It was deprived of hearing correctly the proper words and the verbiage and the sentence structure and all that. And so he was given not only the ability to hear, but he was also given a so-called catch-up class. And he didn't have to go back and say, now go back and listen to how people are talking and learn how to talk now that you can hear. Didn't need that. And that's what makes this miracle here so remarkable when you look deep into it. It's a lot to it when you talk about how he's able to now speak clearly. All right, but look at what happens here. It says, and he continued. I'm sorry. He cautioned them that they should tell what? No one. So once again, he's saying, it's not my time. And once again, this is part of what Jesus is trying to do. It's very much like the Syrophoenician, where there was an order in things, and there's an order in this too. Jesus is showing forth, but he doesn't want the people to get to the point where they want to make him king like they did after he fed the 5,000. He wants to just continue to show the signs. I want you to see who I am. I want you to see that God has brought forth the promised Messiah, that the one that was promised to come through the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am that person. All of the prophets that were talked about, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, all of these, Hezekiah, Zechariah, all of these prophets that have talked about me. I am here, and I'm showing the signs of that I'm here. But there is another time when I am going to come and present myself as king. When I enter into Jerusalem, sitting on that donkey, that's when the time comes for him to rise up and to be popular in that aspect of presenting himself as the king, but not now. And so he wants them. This is why he wants them to keep that quiet, because he's following the proper instructions that were given by God himself, through the prophets, and he's following that. All right, but. So he says, yet as much as he cautioned them, so much more they proclaimed it exceedingly. So even though they were trying to tell them, don't go and tell anybody, they were just going and telling everybody. And you can't really say that I can't believe they did that. I mean, you can understand. Something wonderful happens, I'm just going to tell you, and then that person, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear? And so it goes quick. So word has gotten around. And they were utterly astonished, saying, he has done all things well. It's like Jesus does all things well. He's healing. He's bringing life and hope to people. Now, once again, when the variety and a mass of people are hearing of what's going on, people become interested for different reasons. People see Jesus as the Messiah. Some people see him as the Son of David. Some people see him as a way of getting the Roman government overthrown. Some people see him as a way that I can get close to him and I can become powerful too. Some people see him as a way that I can just get the things that I need done. people seeing him for all different kinds of reasons. All right? But yet they are all astonished, saying he does all things well. He makes even the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. And see, and that's the aspect. So the dumb that could never hear, to know how to speak, can now speak. The deaf that could never hear, now hears. All right? And they continue on. And they come to, and there came to him a great crowd. Now we talked about the crowd before, right? We already iterated that people are coming for all kinds of reasons. Right? So I won't go through that again. Having with them lame, blind, maimed, dumb, and many different ones, and they cast them beside the feet of Jesus, and he healed them. So all these individuals that came to Jesus, Jesus healed them. So that the crowd wondered, seeing the dumb speak, the maimed whole, the lame walk, the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. So when they saw this going on, the scriptures tells us that the crowd wondered. And that wonder is part of, I guess, what you're supposed to have. What is this? But your conclusion is important to what you come to. Because some people will say, I see what Jesus did according to a lot of our historical records. I read the scriptures and the Gospels. And some people come through all that, and their conclusion is Jesus was a great teacher. And yes, he was. He was the master teacher. But if you stop with just that, him being a great teacher, you still miss out. Because he's more than just a great teacher. He's God come in the flesh. He's the Messiah. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And so these people see him as a great healer. They see him and they're wondering and see him and they wonder over all the abilities that he seems to have. And it says, and they glorify God. They're thanking God. They're lifting up God, which is good. And a lot of people can benefit from that and come to the conclusion that Jesus is from God. But if you don't see that he is not just from God, but he is God, that's the important. Now, as we go along through here, we're going to see Jesus ask his disciples, who do people say that I am? They see me do all these different miracles. They see me do all this stuff. Who do people say that I am? And the people are going to say all kinds of stuff. So just because he's doing these wonderful things, and just because these people are astonished and wondering, and they're thanking God for it, doesn't guarantee that they will see Jesus as the way they need to see him, as the Messiah. People still can just fall short. I'm not going to see him as God. And we have that same problem today. A lot of people say Jesus was a great prophet. A lot of different people see him as a great teacher, but they won't see him as God. They say maybe he did heal, maybe he did do some things, but he didn't die for my sins. And that's the part, if you fall short there, then all the healing, all the opening of the dumb, the speech and the opening of the ears, all of that benefits you only for the now. You only get it for the now. When Jesus says, I have more than just for now, I have something for you for the forever. And that's the part that we got to make sure that we receive from the Lord. And that's an important part that oftentimes is missed. So we're going to stop there, Lord willing, not next week, but the following week. We will pick up on story 110, the feeding of the 4,000. Any other comments or questions?